Hi, everybody. As Denise said, my name is Caitlin Cassidy, and I work as a developer at Search Technology, working primarily in VantagePoint software. So today I'm going to walk you through a demo of our auto-classifier function. And as you can see up on the screen here, I have a copy of VantagePoint open with a very bare bones data set of paragraphs from the Gutenberg archive. And so I've got a selection of 3 different authors: Austen, Chesterton, and Shakespeare. And for each author, I have a field designating which work these paragraphs are from. And then, as you can see, these are just excerpts. So the first thing I want to point out for the auto classification function is this training field meta tag. This is how you tell the classifier where your text is, because that's how the classifier works. It looks at the text of a record and decides where it should be placed. So you can set these training fields either in meta tags, or I'll show you in a minute where it can be set in a different dialog. So for using the classifier in VantagePoint, you can do this to sort your records into predefined categories. And we do this by going to the Analyze tab and selecting the Build Classifications dialog. And I don't know if this is sharing. Maybe Denise will give me a thumbs up if it is.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is create my classification. In this case, let's keep it simple and say we want to sort these by author. So I create my new classification. And then over here on the right, I can create my categories. So the first thing I'm going to do is create categories for Austen, Chesterton, and Shakespeare. Okay, so we have our classification, we have our categories, and before we get started on actually training, I just want to draw our attention to these checkboxes down here. Create disregard category can be used for records that don't fit in the classification scheme, but still belong to this record set in some way. So you could be sorting fruits by apples, oranges, and pears. And then if you have a disregard category, the occasional banana and grape can be put in there. And the idea behind this is that the actual groups we use in classification are what we would find in a positive search space, as in we are looking for features that these records all have in common. The disregard category is defined as not anything else. So if you have these bananas and grapes, they don't necessarily have anything in common with each other than not being an apple, orange, or pear. And then the other one is this allow multiple selection. That is in the case where a record can belong to more than one category. So let's say Austen and Shakespeare had a wild collaboration on one of these works. Those paragraphs would require us to do this allow multiple selection. Okay, so now we're going to start categorizing. We can do this in a couple of ways. You can either autosave. You can either open up any field and select records in the title view, right-click, classify records, select your classification, and then select where it belongs. Another option is to open the record in record view. And you can also go through these records and then select the appropriate category over here. Finally, we can use what VantagePoint has as the Smart Trainer, which is just a method for walking you through the training process. This is especially useful if you're not sure where to start. It will aim to cover as much of the search space as it can to kind of give the training a well-rounded set of records to learn from. And the Smart Trainer is in the Analyze, Classify tab. And we click Smart Trainer. This will bring up a window of your training fields and of course the classifications over on this side. Now, for the purposes of demonstration, I do not know exactly where each of these paragraphs belong, so I am going to do a little bit of cheating and go to this field order button. And add the author as a field so that I, the trainer, who in theory doesn't have access to this information, but does know my subject matter very well, so that I can do this demonstration. So our first record is a Chesterton. And you can just click through this shuffle button and the Smart Trainer will walk you through a number of training records. So we're just going to train a few of these because after a while, this progress monitor will start increasing and you'll see in a moment that the classifier will start making guesses. Here we go. So once the classifier feels like it has a slight baseline for how to guess these records, it will start highlighting the group it thinks this record should belong to. And so if its guess is correct, this confidence indicator will increase. And if its guess is wrong, it will penalize the confidence. And we can continue like this until the confidence is at a place we're happy with. Another thing we can do, and this is new to VP16, is that we can add subcategories to these classification fields. And so to do this, either bring up the Build Classifications dialog in the ribbon or in a record view. So going to highlight author, and for the sake of simplicity, let's just say that we are going to subcategorize the Jane Austen works. So now I can create subcategory, and I believe these are Sense and Sensibility, Emma, and Persuasion. And then we could reopen our Smart Trainer, and now we have a separate field for just the Austen subcategory. And again, I do need to cheat somewhat because I am not a subject matter expert. Okay. And now we can see the work that these belong to. Okay, and here's where you can see that the classifier doesn't quite have a perfect handle on the data yet, so it's guessing this is Chesterton when in fact it is Austen. And it is specifically Sense and Sensibility. So one other thing I will point out is that these classification and subcategories are linked. So if you think about this as, by definition, all apples are fruits. So all Emma records are Austen records. If I select Emma, it will automatically also select Austen. Likewise, if it's not Austen, it can't be Emma. So if I deselect Austen, it will also deselect Emma. One final thing I will point out is that because we do not have that multiple selection checkbox checked, if I change my mind and say that this is actually a Chesterton, it will deselect Austin and Emma. Okay, let's stop confusing the poor thing now. And we can continue like this until our confidence indicator reaches a point we're comfortable with. So what the confidence indicator tells us is how likely is the classifier to correctly classify the next record. And so as this number grows, it means that it's more and more confident that any given record it could classify correctly. It's in the red right now. It will change to yellow and green at certain points in the training. Let's just do a few more records here and see if we can get that indicator up just a little bit more. There we go. Now it's in the yellow. So let's classify to 30 records just for a nice round number. Okay, so let's see here. Once we are, we can also go into this auto classifier settings dialog. And if we open this drop down for the classification, we can see which categories are more confident than others. And we can also click in here and it will bring up a word cloud demonstrating what the classifier has learned about the data. So what these are the size of the word, the stem, indicates how much that stem differentiates this category from other categories. So Shakespeare and Chesterton are much less likely to have words like sensible, coxcomb. I'm assuming this is impudent. And so we can do this for any of the categories. One other thing I will draw your attention to is this bias keywords. And we can use this to kind of lead the classifier in the right direction. And we do this through a VantagePoint keywords list. So I'm going to leave this dialog, come over here to my keywords and create a new list. Let's just call this Gutenberg. And in here, I can put terms that I think the classifier should pay attention to that I think will help lead it in a more confident direction. So let's put in some words that I think are more likely to appear in some categories than others. So for Shakespeare, a good example would be Cassius. And we can do this for other terms as well. Let's do Brutus. And then let's indicate something for maybe looking for more Austin records. So we can look for Knightley. And this can be much more extensive, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just leave it there. So now we can come back over to our settings dialog. And then next to the author classification, we can do bias keywords, Gutenberg. So now when we come back here, that's just going to be a little extra boost to the training. And let's see if we can get this above 60%, and then I'll show you the auto classification. Okay. So at only 35 records classified, we have confidence of 64%. Austin, the subcategory, is, for obvious reasons, much less confident. There are fewer records, and Austin's style is going to be consistent across her work. So differentiating the particular works is going to take a bit more training. So once we have this confidence at a point we're happy with, we can double click this radial and it will bring up the automatically classify records dialog. So over on this right side, we have the accuracy target slider, and it goes, and this is what helps you prioritize precision or recall in your results. If you have it at the very lowest setting, it will be less strict with its classifications, but it will classify more records. So if your priority is to get all of your records classified, and it's okay if there are some misses here and there, then you want to put it at this low setting. If the opposite is true and you're okay with many records being unclassified, as long as the ones that are classified are correct, you would set this at this highest accuracy target. I tend to prefer somewhere in between, so I'm going to set this at the second highest point. And so we start classifying. Okay. And once that's done, we can open a list of our classification field, and here you see two new groups have been created. Auto-classified, meaning the computer made this classification and you did not. So we can have all of those records together. And then unclassified are the records that it was not sure enough to put in any given classification. And as you can see, of about 1,500 records, it was unsure about 143 of them. One other thing I will point out is that you can highlight different groups, and this likeness score over here will pop up. And you can sort that from highest, meaning the most Shakespeare-y record there is, which looks very Shakespeare to me. Or if you wanted to go back and make corrections, you could see which records it was less sure about. So this is the least Shakespeare-y, and that would be this here. Okay, for the sake of demonstration, let's also go back and classify a few more Austins just to get that subcategory fleshed out. So I'm just gonna take like 20 of the 16 apparently, and then classify records. Author is the main category, and then the subcategories are listed in here. And I want to classify those as Emma, Persuasion, and Sense and Sensibility. Okay, so now we can go back into Smart Trainer or some other record view, and sometimes it takes a minute for the confidence to update, but now we can see that it's trained a bit more, still not as confident as author, but we have 56 records trained, so let's see how well it does at auto classification. Same thing, double click on the radial and start classifying. So now, once category and subcategory have been classified, there's actually a grouped field over here that is created. And so we can see both fields, the regular classification and the subcategories lined up like so. The final thing I want to show you is that once you have trained a classifier, you can export it to be used in different data sets. So I have once again opened Auto-classifier settings dialog, and I can click export knowledge base. So let's say I have a completely different data set of Austen Chesterton and Shakespeare records. So I want to export this trained author knowledge base. Click OK. I'm just going to save this as Gutenberg. And then that will export rather quickly. Let's pretend this is a completely fresh data set and go ahead and import that. And now you can see it has pulled in the author knowledge base and all existing subcategories, in this case, only the one, which is Austen. I can once again start auto-classifying on only those two fields. And once that's done, we once again have a compound field of those classifications. Last but not least, just for proof of concept, I am going to see how the auto-classifier did by making a confusion matrix. So I'm going to make a matrix with the rows as the auto-classified, as what the classifier put these records in. And then on the columns, I have the ground truth. So we make this confusion matrix. And as you can see, it put the most Chesterton records in unclassified, which isn't surprising. I think when we were training, that was the least number of training records. But it correctly classified 1,083 records out of almost 1,500. So with only 35 records in training, we have about a 67% confidence, which, if you know anything about machine learning and classification, is actually very good for just such a minuscule number of records. I believe that is everything I wanted to cover in this demonstration, and we'll now open it up to questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. We do have a question, and this is back in the beginning concerning the selection of disregard. So the question is, have you confirmed that using disregard rather than having creating an other category?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. The disregard is defined as what it is not, whereas if you were to just create an additional category called other, the records you put in there would have to have something in common. And when most people are conceptualizing an other category, I believe they're thinking of anything that doesn't belong to the rest of these. And so the classifier is not going to be able to find a pattern within the other category, and that will confuse the training. So yes, you are definitely better off creating a disregard category.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? And we'd be happy to allow for an audio and unmute you. Okay, great. Well, then, seeing no further questions, thank you all for attending this morning's webinar, and we look forward to, wait. I think
Alan.
Okay, yes, could you chat about how you might use this on patents?
Sure. So we would use this on patents really in the exact same way. You might use the classifier to, let's say you have a set of patents for X-ray imaging methods. You can tell I don't know a lot about patents, but you may want to sort them into which body part they're focusing on. Or you could have patents for toothpaste and want to sort them by flavor, you know, minty or cinnamon. And I would recommend using the default training fields are title and abstract, and I do recommend using those as training fields. However, there is occasionally useful information in the claims field as well. However, you will get much more consistent results using just title and abstract.